Let's talk about the time that I hit financial rock bottom, woke up, and decided to stop living paycheck to paycheck. Today's video is brought to you by Achieve. My debt wake-up call came when I was pregnant with my first son. I realized once I paid for childcare and health insurance, I would only be bringing home a few $100s a month. But because we were in so much debt, we couldn't afford for me not to make that money, because even though it wasn't much, it was the difference between us making our minimum payments and not being able to. Our life was a never-ending series of monthly payments. I can still go back to those moments and it feels like the air is being knocked out of my lungs. I felt so hopeless and alone, and I know that so many of you feel that way too, but you're not hopeless and you're not alone. Achieve could help you. Achieve helps everyday people like me and you deal with debt and get more cash flow. They understand the struggles of everyday life and that debt can come at you fast. Achieve offers several tailored solutions that could help you consolidate or even reduce your debt. Whether it's a personal loan, a home equity loan, or debt resolution, Achieve meets you where you are. Today, we're going to talk about my debt wake-up call, my debt rock bottom, the day I decided to stop living paycheck to paycheck, all of those things. This is always a hard story for me to tell, but I'm hoping that it will help one of you. Okay, so this is something that I have touched on before. I did a podcast episode about it in an old video, which is now gone. It was just this bad sound quality. My kids were in it, and so it has been removed. But I wanted to talk about how we stopped living paycheck to paycheck and what our financial rock bottom story is. So I lost my job. The company that I was working for folded, and my husband took a $7 an hour pay cut on the same day. On the same day. You know how I learned that the company was folding? We went to deposit our paychecks and were told that they were no good. So we had actually worked for a couple weeks that we were not going to be compensated for. And they said, oh, they had just bought brand new computers. They said, take your computers home in lieu of payment. Because, you know, the bank accepts an iMac for your mortgage. That's how that works. But we were just little bitty babies in our early 20s, fresh out of college, and we were facing a roadblock. And part of the roadblock was because we had not been financially responsible and we were not prepared to weather a disaster. But how do you know you're going to lose your job and your husband's going to take a pay cut in the same day? So we had credit card debt, we had student loan debt, we had no emergency fund, and we had bought a house right after we got married. Why? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. So cut to our navigating a job loss that we weren't prepared for. And what did that mean for us? More credit card debt. Yay. So I took a job working overnight at a grocery store because that was the fastest job I could get. I also nannied, and that left most of my weekday free to go on job interviews and apply for jobs. And I eventually did get another job in a newsroom that paid next to nothing, but had health insurance. It wasn't great health insurance, but it was health insurance. Y'all, your 20s are brutal. You could not pay me to go back 10 years in time. I would not do it. About a year later, I was working in the newsroom. We were just kind of getting our heads above water, or so we thought. And we were trying to sell the house that we had bought when we were young and stupid. We had had the seller fall through. It had just been a nightmare. And then my father-in-law died very suddenly and very unexpectedly, and my husband and I go back to his hometown for the funeral, and we're sitting in his childhood bedroom and my cell phone rings, and it is our insurance company telling me that they can no longer cover our home because it has gone into foreclosure. And it's not like it was a surprise, but it was still, it doesn't matter how bad things have gotten. It doesn't matter. You know, you're struggling to make your payments, you know that, but still something about getting that phone call, and particularly in those circumstances, just felt like the worst possible thing that could happen. We go to bed that night. I think the next day was my father-in-law's funeral. I get on the banking app. We are negative in our checking account. Because all of our bills had just come out, and we have like $126 in savings. And it's like, we cannot continue to live like this. And so that's kind of like part one of the moment that we decided. And so I started freelancing, taking on as many hours in the newsroom as they would give me, working that overtime, working as a sports reporter on the side. Worst sports reporter ever. If you're having to Google what plays are as you're writing an article, but I was determined to hustle my bustle and get us back where we needed to be. We ended up not getting foreclosed on, but we did short sell our house, which is no less horrifying. It just doesn't impact your credit the way a foreclosure would. We're paying all of our bills. We are adding some money into savings. I get pregnant and I know my insurance isn't going to pay for much. And so I start putting every single extra penny that I can aside to pay for the birth of my baby, which cost $11,000. I got a discount actually. I called the hospital and said, if I pay my bill in full, can you like take a little bit off the top? And they did. So I ended up only paying $8,000. Discount, baby. That is actually more than the combined cost of having my next 3 children. Quadruple more. But there were days where I felt like we're never going to get on the other side of this. We are never going to get through this. We are going to be in debt forever. We're going to be passing debt on to our children. Why? It's not going to be like that. It wasn't for us. We paid off $36,000 in 2 years on one little income, which we'll talk about in a second. And that's not going to be you forever either. Listen to me. Look at me. Take my hand. Take my hand. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I know things are hard right now. I know everything's expensive. I know it feels overwhelming. It's gonna be okay. Let me tell you what we did. I had my baby. We're back in our little rental house up on the side of a mountain. My husband gets a call from a company near where my parents live. So we're living outside of Atlanta. He gets a call from Alabama saying, hey, we heard you're awesome and we would like to interview you. He gets offered this job on the spot and they're going to pay our insurance starting day 1. I don't want to move. I don't want to move back to Alabama. I don't want to live in Alabama. But we take the job and it gives us just some time. Like basically we're buying some time. It's much less expensive to live down here. We were able to pay very little in rent and we start saving money. Then I start a little side business as a virtual assistant. My baby's 3 months old. I buy a domain name for $13. I start this business. I start turning a profit and we have extra money to put toward paying off of our debt. But there are some things that we did in the meantime and I've made notes. So the first thing we did was make a list of our debts. And this was hard for us to do. So at this point we have student loans, credit card debt. I was in a car wreck while I was pregnant. Somebody was texting and driving and hit me. You have medical things because of that. It takes forever when you're in an accident to get the insurance to cover things. It's ridiculous. Like by the time we had that paid off, we finally got reimbursed. It was a nightmare. Admitting that there's a problem, admitting how much you have in debt, it's overwhelming, but it is also freeing. And so write it down. Write down who you owe credit card debt to. What are your student loan terms? How much do you owe on that? Is there medical debt? Are there personal loans? Car, things that you put on credit at a store, everything that you can think of, everything that you can find. Pull your credit report if you need to. You get 3 free ones a year. And see who you owe money to. Total it up. It's going to be a lot. It's going to feel overwhelming. You may panic a little. But once you get it out there and you know what you're dealing with, it's easier to overcome it. You can't fight what you can't see. Look at it. Name it. Then we can tackle it. Put something into Google Maps and then you pull that pull down bar and it shows you the turn by turn directions. That's what putting all the debt on paper felt like. Like we make a left here, we pay this off. We make a right here, we pay this off. 2, we tracked our spending. You can do this in a spreadsheet. We did it in a composition notebook. You can do this on an app. You can do it in the Notes app on your phone. There are so many options now for tracking your spending. And every day when you spend money, do a money minute. Make sure it's come out of your checking account. Make sure everything matches up. Total up what you've spent. Track your spending. Number 3, this one's hard right now. I want to be honest that getting out of debt years ago was easier than it is now. But be brutal be brutal temporarily about what you cut. Sacrificing sucks, okay? But so does being in debt. And so you kind of pick where it's going to be hard, because the sacrifice is temporary and the debt can also be temporary if you make those sacrifices. But if you choose not to, that debt is a long-term commitment that you're going to have for the rest of your life. So look at what do we really need and cut it, as Budget Girl calls, scorched earth. Like scorched earth. Nothing special, nothing extra, nothing fancy unless it's your birthday. That's what we did. Scorched earth. You get to determine what you cut and what you don't. It's really up to you because it's your money. But just really going as bare bones as possible. Okay, so we focused just on the basic necessities of our rent at the time. We had a baby, so keeping him in diapers, making sure that our basic bills were paid for, you know, our bills were all covered. And then at the time, we had a newborn, and then we had a newborn and a toddler, and then 2 toddlers. So we were able to keep our grocery budget pretty low. I know that's nearly impossible now, but just keeping things as tight as possible and focusing only on essentials and necessities. Food, water, electric, gas to get to work. I wasn't buying clothes. My kids' clothes were hand-me-downs. If I needed something, I borrowed it. So at one point a vacuum cleaner broke. I asked my mom to borrow hers. She's like, oh, I got this old one I don't like. Do you want it? Between you and me, I think she went and bought a new vacuum cleaner. But I took it. Still have a ton of the hand-me-down furniture that outfitted that little rental house we were living in. We learned to say no to things. It was awkward when people would invite us to do stuff. Jason had a lot of guys that started working at the same place he was that had worked at the previous place, and he had known them since college, and they would hang out and go out on weekends and go out to eat and do, you know, big things, and we couldn't, and we would have to say no. And at the time he was their supervisor, and so it was kind of hard for him as a supervisor to be like, we're trying to save money, we're trying to get out of debt. But it was worth it in the end. We got invited to go on a couple trips with some people, and we had to say no to that. I do remember going to a wedding when I had my first son and staying in a hotel, and my mother-in-law was staying there too, and her like taking the baby for the night so that my husband and I could go out on a date, and it just being like the biggest deal in the world. I felt so fancy because it had been so long. We also learned to get creative with our dates. My husband and I still prioritize alone time and together time, and so even when we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, it was still really important for us to do those date nights at home. And so it was a lot of getting movies from the library or watching old TV shows in box set, because we didn't even do streaming services at the time because we didn't want to pay for them. And so just finding ways to do that, or cooking different meals. We negotiated our bills. So there are a couple different things that I'm talking about. Number one, we called our credit card companies and we asked for them to lower our interest rate, and I will link below to a script that you can use to do that. But we were able to get our interest rate lowered twice. I also would call our cell phone company at the time, our internet provider, and I would see what kind of, when I would see like new customer deals, and I would say, hey, you know, we've been loyal customers, we paid our bills on time, can you offer us this discount? Sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes they would say, no, we can't, but we can offer you a little discount. I'm not ashamed to ask. We also took advantage of cash deals. So things like car repairs, once we were out of debt and we bought our new windows, that sort of thing, I will still ask, like, do you offer a cash discount? We sold things. We sold so many things. We put it on Facebook Marketplace, we put it on Craigslist. Oh, when I think about meeting up with people to sell things on Craigslist now, that just gives me the ick. But books. So I'm a big reader. I would get books at the thrift store, I would read them, and then I would resell them. My kid, when my kids would outgrow their clothes, my maternity clothes, toys that they were no longer playing with. And remember, we bought a lot of stuff secondhand. So we were buying it secondhand, using it until we no longer needed it, and then selling it. I still kind of think of the thrift store as a storage unit. Like, I don't need that. I'm gonna go get it from the thrift store. When I no longer need it, I'm gonna pass it on or I'm gonna sell it. Oh, side note, my friend told me that she gets crock pots at yard sales for like $5, $10. And then when she has to take a meal to someone, she's like, here you go, and here's a crock pot. Like I said, we found ways to make extra income. I was working as a virtual assistant during my baby's naps, at night after they went to bed, early in the morning, and I still do that now. That is my primary source of income, is being a VA. That I've had a lot of experience managing time, and so when I talk about time management tips, I know what I'm talking about. But bringing in even just a little bit of extra every single month was a big deal. And then also I kind of viewed anytime I saved money, that was bringing in money, because the reality is your income has to exceed your expenses in order to make this work. And if your expenses exceed your income, you have to find a way to make that difference. And it is exhausting, but it is temporary. Okay, I would love for you to share your debt wake-up call with me. Leave me a comment below. Don't forget to check out Achieve in the description. Thank you for being here, and we'll talk soon.